Thanks for the notes, by the way. You're really good at capturing my vision. She said it right after the investors left, while I was still sitting in that corner chair with my laptop balanced on my knees. The same corner where I'd watched her deliver my pitch. Every pause, every inflection point, every rhetorical question I'd rehearsed alone in my apartment for 3 weeks. She even used the hand gesture I'd practiced in the mirror, that small cutting motion when describing market disruption. 9 people applauded her. Not one looked at me. I'd been at the company for 4 years. She'd been there for 7 months. Her father founded it. That was her entire resume. I'd spent 6 months developing the concept after hours, testing it with industry contacts I'd built over a decade, refining the model through late-night calls with former colleagues who trusted me. I made the mistake of sharing it with her when she asked to collaborate. She'd seemed genuinely interested, asked thoughtful questions, took careful notes. I thought I'd found an ally. I thought being helpful would matter. 2 weeks later, she scheduled the investor meeting. She didn't tell me it was about my concept until the day before, when she asked me to sit in and take notes for reference. I should have known then, but I convinced myself she'd credit me, that she'd bring me in as co-lead. I told myself powerful people don't succeed by stealing. Her father sat in that meeting too. He smiled at her the whole time. I'd never seen him smile at anyone like that. The company had been struggling for 2 years. Everyone knew it. This pitch was supposed to save us. She positioned herself as the savior. After the meeting, I heard 2 investors talking in the hallway about how impressive it was that someone her age could develop such a sophisticated framework. One of them said her father must be very proud. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I kept replaying her wink, the casual cruelty of it, the certainty that I couldn't do anything. What was I going to do? Tell her father his daughter was a fraud? Tell the investors? With what proof? She'd been in every meeting where I'd discussed the concept. She had notes. She could claim collaboration, say I was bitter, say I was jealous of her position. Who would believe the mid-level employee over the founder's daughter? I decided to do nothing. I would keep my head down, keep my job, swallow it. Then she called me into her office 3 days later. Before I tell you what happened next, I just want to say thank you for listening to my story. It's still hard to talk about, even now. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Andrea. I'm 32, and until last year, I defined myself by my work. I'm the person who brings a notebook to dinner parties, because ideas don't wait for convenient moments. I'm the one who stays up reading industry reports while my friends are out. I once missed my cousin's wedding because I was finishing a prototype. I'm not proud of that part. I grew up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs. We moved 7 times before I finished high school. When I got my first stable job, I swore I'd never feel that kind of uncertainty again. Maybe that's why I work so hard. Maybe that's why what happened hurt so much. The investors want to move forward, she said, leaning back in her chair. They're putting in serious money. I need you on the execution team. I must have looked confused because she laughed, a light tinkling sound that suddenly felt like fingernails on my skin. Don't worry, you'll get credit for implementation, but I'll be leading it, obviously. That's when I understood. She didn't just steal the idea. She didn't know how to execute it. The concept required managing relationships with 5 specific industry gatekeepers I'd spent years cultivating. It required understanding regulatory frameworks I'd studied extensively. It required technical knowledge she didn't have and couldn't fake. She needed me, desperately. I sat there, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but now there was something else. Something clearer, colder. Obviously, I repeated, my voice neutral. Great, she clapped her hands together. I knew I could count on you. First meeting tomorrow at 9. I need you to prepare a breakdown of the initial action steps. I nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. Andrea, she called after me. I turned. This is going to be huge for the company, for all of us. She smiled. My father is already talking about promotions if we pull this off. All of us? I asked. Her smile never wavered. That night, I called my oldest friend, Jenna. We'd met in college, back when I thought business was about merit. She just took it? Jenna asked. The whole concept? Every bit, I said, staring at my apartment ceiling, right down to my hand gestures. You have to quit. I can't. I just signed a lease I can barely afford. The job market's terrible. And honestly, where would I go that this couldn't happen again? Report her to HR? I laughed. the sound hollow even to my own ears. Her father owns the company, Jen. Then confront her directly, tell her, and be labeled difficult? The bitter employee who can't work with the boss's daughter? That's career suicide. So what, you just let her win? I was quiet for a long moment. No, I finally said. I just don't think winning means what she thinks it does. What does that mean? I sat up, suddenly energized. She doesn't understand the concept. Not really. She memorized my pitch, but she doesn't get how it works. So she can't implement it without me. And the investors are expecting results. I'm not following. She needs me to make her look good. But what if I just let her look exactly as knowledgeable as she actually is? You're going to sabotage her? No, I said firmly. That would hurt the company, and there are people there who don't deserve that. I'm going to do my job perfectly. I'm going to answer every question she asks me correctly and completely. I'm just not going to save her when she inevitably reveals that she doesn't understand what she's doing. That's kind of brilliant. It's honest, I said. And honesty is what got me into this mess. Maybe it can get me out. I spent that night preparing for the meeting, but not in the way she expected. I created a detailed implementation plan. Yes, but I also prepared a separate document, one that listed every complex question likely to come up, every technical challenge, every regulatory hurdle. I memorized the answers, all of them. The next morning, I walked into the conference room 5 minutes early. She was already there, scrolling through her phone. Her father sat beside her, reviewing printouts of my implementation plan. 7 other people filled the room, department heads, key developers, and her father's right-hand man, Thomas, who had been with the company since the beginning. Let's get started, she said when the clock hit 9. Everyone's seen the implementation plan, right? Heads nodded around the table. Great. So, first steps, she began. Reading directly from my document, I sat quietly, taking careful notes, watching. Her father looked at her with unvarnished pride. Thomas, however, kept glancing between her and me, his brow furrowed slightly. 20 minutes in, the head of development raised his hand. Yes, Eric? She said, pointing to him with a manicured finger. I'm concerned about the API integration with the legacy systems. The documentation suggests significant compatibility issues. She blinked. Once, twice. The integration would need to be carefully managed, of course. But how? Eric pressed. The legacy system uses proprietary protocols. How would you bridge that gap? Her eyes flicked to me for a split second. I looked down at my notebook, wrote nothing, and waited. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Well, she finally said, we'll need to develop a custom interface layer. Using what framework? Eric asked. Another silence. Longer this time. Her father shifted in his chair. I could have saved her. I knew exactly what to say. A custom translation layer using REST APIs with specialized wrappers for the legacy system's proprietary calls. I'd already mapped it out, identified the challenges, drafted potential solutions. One sentence from me would have ended the awkward silence. Instead, I watched her falter. We'll determine the best framework during the technical assessment phase, she finally said, her voice tight. Eric frowned. But that assessment would need to happen before we commit to the timeline you've proposed. These integration challenges could add months to the development cycle. Her father was watching her now, his earlier pride giving way to something less certain. Andrea, he said suddenly, you've been looking at the technical requirements. What's your assessment of the integration challenges? All eyes turned to me, including hers, wide with relief and something else. Warning, maybe. The legacy system uses proprietary protocols, as Eric mentioned, I said, my voice steady. We'd need to develop a custom translation layer using REST APIs with specialized wrappers to handle the proprietary calls. I've drafted some potential approaches. I pulled a document from my folder and passed copies around the table. This outlines 3 options, with different trade-offs in terms of development time, maintenance, complexity, and performance overhead. Her father took the document, scanned the first page, and nodded slowly. This is detailed work, he said. I like to be thorough, I replied. He looked at his daughter. Olivia, had you reviewed these options? She recovered quickly. Of course. I asked Andrea to document the technical specifics, since she'll be overseeing that aspect of implementation. I see, he said. He didn't sound entirely convinced. The meeting continued. 3 more technical questions came up. Each time, Olivia hesitated, fumbled, then looked to me. Each time, I waited just long enough for everyone to notice her uncertainty before providing a clear, comprehensive answer. By the end of the meeting, a subtle shift had occurred. When people had questions, they began addressing them to me directly, though they still formally acknowledged Olivia as the leader. As we filed out, Thomas, her father's trusted lieutenant, "Impressive work on those technical specifications," he said quietly. "Thank you. Interesting that you had time to prepare such detailed options while also putting together the overall implementation plan." I met his eyes. "I work quickly, clearly." He paused. "How long have you been developing this concept, Andrea?" I could have lied, could have said it was a team effort, that Olivia and I had worked on it together. It would have been safer. Instead, I said, 6 months, nights and weekends, mostly. He nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Good work deserves recognition." "Yes," I agreed. "It does." Over the next 3 weeks, we held twice-weekly progress meetings. Each time, the pattern repeated. Olivia would present using my materials. Someone would ask a question she couldn't answer. She'd look to me with increasing desperation. I would answer, clearly and confidently. After letting her struggle just long enough, her father attended every meeting. I watched his expression change over time, from pride to confusion, to something that looked like disappointment. One particularly brutal session involved a potential investor who asked detailed questions about regulatory compliance in European markets. Olivia had no idea. She stammered through vague responses until the investor cut her off. "I'm not comfortable with this level of uncertainty," he said. "Who on your team actually understands the EU regulatory framework?" Olivia's face flushed deep red. "Andrea has been researching that aspect," she said, throwing me under the bus without hesitation. The investor turned to me. "And what have you found?" I opened my laptop and pulled up a detailed matrix I'd prepared. "The primary challenges are in 3 areas," I explained, walking him through the complex regulatory landscape with precise, confident detail. 20 minutes later, the investor was nodding, satisfied. "This is exactly what I needed to hear," he said. To me, not Olivia. After the meeting, her father asked me to stay behind. "You seem very knowledgeable about all aspects of this project," he said once everyone else had left. "I've put a lot of time into it," I replied. "More than my daughter, it appears." I said nothing. He studied me. "How would you characterize Olivia's contribution to this concept?" This was it, the moment to accuse, to expose, to demand justice. But direct confrontation wasn't my strategy. Olivia recognized its potential, I said carefully. She saw value in what I'd developed. "What you developed," he repeated, not a question, a clarification. I held his gaze. "Yes," he nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty, Andrea." The following week, Olivia wasn't at our scheduled progress meeting. Her father led it instead, calling on me frequently to explain technical details. The week after that, he announced that we'd be restructuring the project leadership to better align with team members' strengths. Olivia was moved to marketing. I was named project lead. She cornered me in the break room the day after the announcement. "You planned this," she hissed, her perfect composure cracked wide open. "You set me up. How?" I asked. "By doing my job? By answering questions truthfully? You could have prepared me better. You deliberately made me look bad. I gave you every document, every brief, every piece of information you asked for. I answered every question you asked me. What I didn't do was pretend you understood things you clearly didn't. My father thinks I lied to him." "Did you?" She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "You won't last," she said, her voice low. "My father might be disappointed in me right now, but I'm still his daughter. You're still nobody. I'm the person who can implement the concept that will save this company," I said. "That makes me somebody." I walked away, feeling her glare burning into my back. For the next month, I threw myself into making the project succeed. I built a strong team, established clear processes, and began delivering measurable results. The investors were impressed. Her father was visibly relieved as key milestones were hit. Olivia stopped coming to the office regularly. I heard she was working remotely on a vaguely defined marketing initiative. When she did appear, she avoided me entirely. 6 weeks after taking over, I delivered a comprehensive progress report to the original 9 investors, the same ones who had applauded Olivia's presentation of my concept. This time, they applauded me. Afterward, one of them, an older woman named Patricia, approached me. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" I should have asked more questions during that first presentation. Something didn't feel right, but I didn't want to create awkwardness. I've been in rooms where women's ideas aren't taken seriously, and I didn't want to undermine another woman. Now I realize I was enabling something else entirely. "You couldn't have known," I said. Still, she handed me her card. "I'd like to hear about your next concept directly from you. No intermediaries." That night, Jenna took me out to celebrate. "To justice," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "Not quite. What do you mean? You got the credit. You're leading the project. She's been exposed." "Only partially," I said. "Her father knows she didn't create the concept, but I'm not sure he understands she deliberately stole it, and the investors still think she was just out of her depth, not dishonest. Does it matter? You won. I considered this. It matters to me, not for vindication, but because the same thing could happen to someone else if the pattern isn't fully recognized." "What are you going to do?" I sipped my drink. "Keep delivering results, build trust, and wait for the right moment." "For what?" "To make sure the lesson sticks." The right moment came 3 months later, during the final presentation to the investors before full implementation. Olivia had been gradually returning to the office, reinstating herself in various meetings, trying to reclaim territory. Her father, while still careful with her, had begun bringing her back into the fold. She'd even started taking credit for the project's success, telling people how she'd identified the core opportunity and assembled the right team to execute her vision. Some people, those who hadn't witnessed those early meetings, believed her. The final presentation was crucial. With successful implementation, the company would secure an additional funding round that would ensure its future. Everyone was there, all 9 investors, the entire executive team, key project personnel, and, of course, Olivia and her father. I delivered a comprehensive overview of what we'd accomplished, the challenges we'd overcome, and the path forward. People were impressed, engaged, asking thoughtful questions that I answered with confidence. Then, as the presentation concluded, Olivia's father stood up. "I want to thank everyone who contributed to this project's success," he said, "particularly Andrea, whose leadership has been exemplary." He paused, then added, "And I'd like to acknowledge my daughter, Olivia, who first brought this opportunity to our attention." I felt a flicker of the old anger, but kept my expression neutral. "In fact," he continued, "Olivia has prepared some remarks on the journey from concept to implementation." He gestured to Olivia, who rose with practiced grace and took his place at the head of the table. "Thank you, Daddy," she said, her voice honeyed. She launched into a narrative about how she'd identified a market gap and conceptualized a solution, taking full credit for the original insight. She talked about assembling the right team and delegating technical execution while maintaining the strategic vision. I watched the faces around the room. Some people were nodding. Others, those who knew the truth, looked uncomfortable. When she finished, she smiled brightly. "Any questions?" The room was quiet. Then Patricia, the investor, who had apologized to me, raised her hand. "Yes, Patricia," Olivia acknowledged her with perfect confidence. "I'm curious," Patricia said, her voice pleasant but firm. "Could you walk us through the initial development process? What research methods did you use to validate the concept before presenting it to us?" Olivia's smile flickered for just a second before stabilizing. "Of course, I began with a comprehensive market analysis, identifying key pain points in our industry." "Could you be more specific?" Patricia pressed. "What data sources did you use? Which industry experts did you consult?" Olivia's composure began to crack. "Various sources, industry reports, primarily." "Which ones?" Patricia tilted her head slightly. Olivia glanced at me, then quickly away. "Standard publications, the Johnson Quarterly, MIT Business Reviews." I almost laughed. Neither of those publications existed. "Interesting," Patricia said. "And the regulatory framework you developed, especially for European markets? That was quite sophisticated. What was your process for mapping those requirements?" Olivia was visibly sweating now. worked with our legal team. The head of legal frowned. Olivia, we were never consulted on this project until after the initial investor presentation. The room went quiet. All eyes were on Olivia. I meant outside counsel, she stammered. Which firm? Her father asked, his voice soft but penetrating. She couldn't answer. I felt no joy in watching her unravel, only a strange, hollow vindication. Patricia turned to me. Andrea, perhaps you could help us understand the early development process. Everyone looked at me, including Olivia, her eyes wide with panic and rage. This was the moment I'd waited for. I could destroy her completely, list every theft, every lie, every manipulation. I had detailed records, emails, meeting notes, timestamps on documents that proved the timeline of my work. But looking at her, I realized something important. I didn't need her destruction to validate my creation. I began developing the concept about 6 months before our first investor presentation, I said calmly. I identified the market gap through interviews with 17 industry clients. I tested potential solutions with a network of former colleagues who specialize in different aspects of the problem. I studied the European regulatory framework through direct consultation with compliance officers at 3 companies who'd recently navigated similar challenges. I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder. I've maintained detailed documentation of the development process, I continued, including early drafts, research notes, and correspondence with subject matter experts. I'd be happy to share it with anyone who's interested in understanding how we arrived at our current approach. Patricia nodded. I'd appreciate that. Olivia's father stood up slowly. I think we need to take a short break, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. 10 minutes, everyone. As people filed out, he looked at me. Andrea, please stay. Then to his daughter. You too, Olivia. When everyone else had left, he closed the door and turned to face us. Explain, he said to Olivia. Now, she tried once more. Daddy, it was a collaborative. Stop. The word cut through the room like a blade. The truth, Olivia. All of it. She stared at the floor. Andrea developed the concept. She finally said, her voice small. I took it. I thought I could figure out the details later. He closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. When he opened them, he turned to me. How long have you known? I asked, suspected since those early meetings. Known for certain? About a month. Thomas showed me the timestamp evidence. I've been waiting to see if my daughter would come clean on her own. He looked at Olivia. She didn't. I'm sorry, she whispered. It's not me you should apologize to, he said. She turned to me, tears streaming now. I'm sorry, Andrea. I nodded once, acknowledging but not absolving. Her father sighed deeply. Andrea, would you give us a moment, please? Tell everyone we'll reconvene in 15 minutes. I left them there, father and daughter, with the wreckage of trust between them. When the meeting resumed, Olivia wasn't present. Her father addressed the room. I owe everyone an apology, he said, particularly Andrea. There has been a significant misattribution of credit for this project. The concept was developed entirely by Andrea, and the successful implementation has been due to her leadership. My daughter presented Andrea's work as her own in our initial meeting. This was wrong, and it will be corrected. He turned to me. Andrea, please continue with the presentation. This is your moment. I stood up, aware of all eyes on me. Thank you, sir. But before I continue, I want to emphasize that while the concept was mine, its successful implementation has been a true team effort. Everyone in this room has contributed to making it work. I saw respect dawn in his eyes and in others around the room. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. The investors asked thoughtful questions. I answered with confidence, occasionally deferring to team members who had expertise in specific areas. By the end, the additional funding was secured. The company's future was stable. Afterward, Patricia approached me again. That was gracious, she said. What you did in there? What do you mean? You could have twisted the knife. You didn't. I shrugged. What would that accomplish? Most people would want revenge. I wanted recognition. I corrected her, and I got it. Well, you've certainly made an impression. If you ever decide to move on from here, call me. My firm is always looking for people with both intelligence and integrity. She left, and Thomas took her place. That was well handled, he said. Thank you for showing him the evidence, I replied. I wondered who had. He nodded. Justice matters, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. 1. Olivia didn't return to the office that day, or the next. When she finally reappeared a week later, she was subdued. Her father announced a restructuring. She would be taking a development role in a subsidiary company across the country, an opportunity to build her skills from the ground up. Before she left, she stopped by my office. We hadn't spoken since that day. I wanted to say goodbye, she said, hovering in the doorway. Good luck in Seattle, I replied. I never thought it would go this far, she said. I just wanted my father to be proud of me. I understand that feeling. Do you hate me? I considered the question. No, I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. She nodded, accepting this. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for taking credit, but for what I said after, that you were nobody. That was cruel, and it wasn't true. No, it wasn't. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? How did you know I wouldn't be able to implement it? That I'd need you? I didn't. I just knew the concept was solid, and I wasn't going to let it fail because of pride. Sometimes the work matters more than who gets credit for it. I wish I'd understood that sooner, she said quietly. Then, she left. Her father promoted me to VP of Innovation the following week. He also instituted new company policies on intellectual property and attribution. 6 months later, the implementation was complete and successful. The company stabilized. Our stock price recovered. The crisis had passed. Olivia and I still exchange occasional professional emails. She's working her way up in the Seattle office, more slowly this time, but with what seems like genuine effort. Her father visits her monthly. They're rebuilding their relationship, I hear, though things between them will never be quite the same. As for me, I lead a team of 12 now. I make sure every one of them receives credit for their contributions. I've become known for spotting and nurturing talent, especially in people who might otherwise be overlooked. Sometimes I think about that afternoon, watching her deliver my pitch with such confidence, the anger I felt, the powerlessness, but those feelings don't have much hold on me anymore. I learned something important through all of this. Your work speaks for itself, eventually. You just have to give it the chance to be heard. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you for listening. I hope it helps someone who might be facing something similar. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have handled it differently? And if you want to hear more stories like this one, you know what to do. Sometimes sharing our experiences is the most powerful way to change them.